Dive into the world of business growth like never before. This episode of Business Growth Talk features the legendary Richard Parker, a titan in mergers and acquisitions with over 3 decades of unmatched expertise. Discover the secrets that have powered Richard to selling over 100,000 copies of his groundbreaking program in 80 countries and mentor under the prestigious Ray Dalio family office. Join myself as we explore through Rich's journey through the complexities of acquiring businesses, from the tactical advantage of buying over new to be able to mastering empathetic negotiation strategies. Get a front seat to the insider's knowledge that has guided Richard in advising on transactions worth $2 billion and his personal success in acquiring 13 companies. Whether you are an aspiring entrepreneur or a seasonal business owner, this episode is packed with actionable insights on aligning your skills with the right business opportunity, leveraging seller finances, and fostering relationships that lead to a successful acquisition. Don't miss Richard's invaluable advice on the ideal conditions for buying businesses in 2024 and his passion to empower the next generation of business leaders. Hit play to transform your approach to business growth and acquisitions with the wisdom of Richard Parker, where every minute is a step closer to your next big breakthrough. Subscribe now for more episodes that promise to change the way you think about entrepreneurship and success. Today we have Richard Parker here, who has 30 years worth of experience in mergers and acquisitions. Richard has a program called How to Buy a Good Business at a Great Price. This program has sold over 100,000 copies across 80 countries, empowering prospective small business owners. Richard has successfully acquired 13 companies alongside advisory roles in transactions over $2 billion. Richard was hired by the Ray Dalio family office as an investor, which is an investment and a hedge fund manager of Bridgewater Associates, to mentor his son at the art of acquiring small businesses. Richard is based in Florida, USA, and if you are enjoying this content, then please do consider subscribing and go to businessgrowthtalks.com for more information. Hello, Richard. How are you today?
I'm terrific. How you doing?
I'm doing really good. Thank you so much for joining me today. We've had other people on the show about acquiring businesses, but it is a really fascinating area for me because it's a strategy that I ran a couple of businesses, as I said to you beforehand, in real estate, and we've got the podcast business. And it's always something that makes me think about that whole idea of being able to grow. And this is what I think is going to be interesting for the show, how to grow through acquisitions rather than just trying to grow a business incrementally and then reinvest in funds and growing it that way. So I'm super pleased that you're here today. Thank you so much for being here.
Of course, I'm happy to be here. I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Great. So the first question I ask all of my guests is, what does a business mindset mean to you?
For me personally, and it's taken a number of years to evolve to it, but when I look at a business today, as far as, and I'm not talking during the process of acquiring it, once I own it, to me, a mindset is, I'd like to use the following phrases: I'm going to build this into a great business by doing the following. I don't focus on the money, as crazy as that sounds, and that's come through some good learning of working with massively successful people and trying to extract their best tips and strategies. And the thing that I learned through all of them, and I've worked with small business owners right up to billionaires, is the money part comes later. In other words, if you focus on building a great business, doing right by the clients, the customers, the product, empowering employees to make decisions, hiring bigger, better, faster people than you to work in the company, then you could really focus on building a great business. So for me, the mindset is really to build a great company.
Right.
With specific bullets below that of how we're going to do that in this particular instance, because I've owned 13 companies, actually 14, but that to me is what a business mindset means, at least to me personally.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's what I'm looking for. And this was a question much later on, but I'm going to bring it straight to the start. Do you see yourself as an entrepreneur, a business owner, or do you see yourself as an investor by acquiring these businesses?
Entrepreneur. 100%.
Right.
Investor, very distant second.
Okay. Why is that?
Because I like to take an active role. Even
Right.
in businesses where I've acquired that my mission or my goal was to extract myself in a reasonable period of time.
Yeah.
I'm of the mindset that you have to get operationally involved in the business. If you bought a business, I know there's this, people are very excited about these ideas of buying absentee owned businesses. I think absentee owned businesses equal absentee profits, because then you don't even know who to hire. If you have a manager in place, you know nothing about the business or not enough about the business, and the manager quits or something happens, then you've got to get involved. You don't even know enough to hire a manager. So for me personally, I love to get immersed in the business. I find myself intellectually curious, not intellectual. Don't confuse. Intellectually curious.
Yeah.
And I love to get immersed and really learn the nuts and bolts. I love learning about new businesses, and so that I could take a step back and with the team make good decisions going forward. So to me, I view as an entrepreneur someone who's more involved as opposed to an investor or a passive investor.
So what these 13 or 14 businesses that you've owned, across what industries do they cover?
Initially, they were consumer products, generally, and more sold directly, not sold directly to consumers, but sold through retailers. And those were toys, infant products, sporting goods, all related to those industries. Because after my first acquisition, which was a manufacturer's rep organization, realized a couple of things very quickly. Number one, it would be much easier to grow my business by buying businesses as opposed to organic growth. And secondly, I've always felt that to scale a business, if you have a good, solid customer base that enjoys doing business with you, the goal is to just get more stuff to sell to the same existing clients. And so I remember reading way back, there was a book called Thriving on Chaos by Tom Peters. And it was a terrific book. And they were talking about at that point in time that existing customers are 60% more prone to buy from an existing vendor than it is as opposed to going out and finding a new client. And so that always resonated with me. So I really took that, and it made sense in my own experience. So I tried to buy or bolt on businesses where I can sell additional products or services to the existing client base. Then I went off the reservation a little bit, and I made some acquisitions that weren't really in my wheelhouse, that didn't fit with my 5 golden rules of businesses, what businesses have to have in place for me to acquire them, that fits right with my strengths and doesn't suffer from my weaknesses. And whenever I bought something that didn't fit into the right wheelhouse, the business didn't do well. I bought the wrong business.
Yeah. Yeah. And we all have to do that. We're learning through this experience as a business owner, and sometimes we overstretch. Sometimes
Yes.
opportunities come to us that aren't right, and it's sometimes a little bit hard to say no. I've had opportunities come to me that have been interesting, but as you say, not quite in my wheelhouse, and I've said no to them, even though I could see the potential in them. It's sometimes hard to say no when, if it's a valid business and it actually has a lot of validity in what they're doing. If it's not in your wheelhouse, if you're not going to add value to that business, you probably shouldn't buy it or JV with people with it.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, as time goes on and you get better at the acquisition game, you have to be disciplined. You have to learn how to say quick no's and slow maybes.
I like that. I like that. Okay. Tell me one thing about your upbringing which reflects on who you are today.
One thing of my upbringing, I grew up in a lower middle class family, and in Canada, in Montreal. One thing that sort of really resonates is my mother had a few jobs. My father was a hardworking guy. He was a door-to-door aluminum siding salesman, a real throwback. And interestingly enough, as a kid, I always had second jobs or had a little business or whatever. My father would never offer to give me any money if I didn't have a job. So as long as I had a part-time job, if the weekend came and I wanted to go out, if I didn't have a part-time job, he never said to me, "Do you need a couple of bucks?" If I had a part-time job, he'd always, say to me, "Do you need some money for the weekend," or what have you. And that's one of those lessons. It was the reinforcement of, you got to work, right? And you got to pay your dues. And so that always resonated with me. I was talking about that not too long ago with a friend of mine, saying that, but always had an impact, because it reinforced this idea of having to work and be accountable and responsible and productive, even at a young age, even if I was just doing stuff around the house. Yeah, and then you get rewarded for it. But if not, my father had no patience for lazy people.
And what were the type of jobs that you did in your younger, like teenage years?
Always shoveled snow, always, and made great money, because in Montreal you used to get slammed with some of these storms and no one can get their cars out. And the
Yeah,
companies that used to clear some people's driveway, there weren't a lot of them because we weren't in a wealthy area, so you couldn't really hire, most people couldn't hire a third party to come in and clear a driveway. So my buddy, a couple of my buddies, my buddy Brian and a couple of ones, but lived on both sides of me. We used to go out feverishly when some kids slept in. I wanted to get to the park as fast as I could during the day to skate and play ice hockey. So
right.
I knew that if I'd go out and shovel like a maniac, that I could make a lot of I could make a lot of money. And there were some days we used to split a couple $100, really young. We were talking like 45 years ago, right? So that
Right.
that was great. Always delivered newspapers at a couple of those routes. And then I had a DJ business. Um, Always had something on the go.
Oh, amazing. Amazing. Let's get on to acquiring businesses. So we're going to start right at the start. Again, I'm going to keep this very simple initially. Why should my listeners and viewers consider acquiring companies rather than starting a new business?
Because with an existing business, you have a running start. With a startup, you have nothing in place. You don't even have paper clips. It's very easy to sit down with a blank piece of paper and think of all these wonderful things that's going to happen to the business. And yet, what typically happens is the revenues come in twice as slow and the expenses happen twice as fast. And yet nothing is proven. And so it's very easy to convince yourself that something is wonderful when there's a clean slate or a tabula rasa, right? There's nothing in place, versus an existing business where if you do this the right way, if you get the keys to the place on Monday, you should be able to take a paycheck on Friday. You've got revenue, you've got customers, you got employees, you got processes, you got systems. Now in America, for example, 96% of all startups fail in the first 5 years. You buy an
Similar in the
existing,
UK.
yeah, it's similar in the UK, right?
Yeah.
So if you buy an existing business, you've already gone through that whole startup stage. It's already a proven entity. And so why do you want to start with your back against the wall, or a gun, if you will, between your eyeballs, versus going into something where you hit the ground running?
Yeah. There is there's a certain charm about starting a business and struggling and the sort of the fight. And I listen to a lot of podcasts and audiobooks and things. And the people that say that their favorite bit of the business is the first 5 or 10 employees, that sort of really starting something. And the idea of creating something is an interesting idea as well.
I agree. Yeah, I
So
agree.
what
There's a certain romance attached to it. There's also about tenfold the heartburn attached to it.
You're absolutely right. The idea of that most businesses fail, most small businesses will fail in the first year, and that's the reality of it. And for my listeners, I'm just thinking that idea of having a running start, having some employees, having the systems and processes does lend to it. This is a question I was going to ask later, but let's jump into it now. Franchising. What's your
Yep.
view on franchising? Because that gives you all the systems and processes in place. You're lifting and shifting a business from Florida to Michigan or where Ohio or wherever. What's the advantages and disadvantages of franchises?
So there's a couple of points. The when And I like franchises because it's a proven methodology, or it's a recipe that, for the most part, has worked in certain locations under certain conditions. Similarly, franchises for individuals that lack the confidence or have any lack of any operational experience, who really feel that they want to explore and get into the world of business ownership, but because of confidence or what have you,
Mm.
can't prod themselves to make the move. Franchises are a terrific option. So you have to look at this like almost on an axis. You either want to have support or you want to have control. If you want to have support but don't mind giving up control, a franchise is for you. If
Right.
you want to have control but you don't necessarily need support, a non-franchise business makes more sense for you. With that said, I love the model of a franchise, and it is right for certain people. And in those cases, I advise people to buy a franchise resale. So it's a franchise that's already up. The business is already operational. And then you could marry the best of the franchise world with the best of an existing business, as opposed to starting a new franchise location, because that's just very similar to a startup, except that the concept has been proven to a certain extent in other locations. So to me, franchises make a lot of sense for a lot of people, but in cases where it does, we'll buy an existing one. Then you have a franchise, you got all the support, you have the recipe in place, and you also have a proven location.
Mm, mm. But a lot of franchisors are looking to build it into a new location. So if they've had a business, let's just say a restaurant, it's probably one of the easiest examples of it. You've got a company that's in, let's just take Florida, for example, and they've got 3 or 4 locations in the area, and they're doing really well. They're like, I know restaurants are notoriously difficult to do really well, but let's just say they are doing
Not
really
all.
well.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they're looking to maybe move to the next state along, or a couple of other states, and they've got all of the systems and processes in place. Does that, if that person is thinking, like, as a franchisor, they're thinking to themselves, we want to expand the business, we want to build it into another 2 or 3 states in the surrounding areas, but we haven't got the manpower, we haven't got the scope to be able to do that. Is You said the whole idea of buying up the franchise as a whole, for that person that, as you say, might not be as confident as they potentially, as perhaps they probably could be, that whole idea of lifting and shifting to another state or another area, would that work? That, for me, I think does work in certain circumstances with the right people and the right request of what the franchisee wants and what the franchisor wants.
So there's a couple of questions there. The first thing, going back to the original comment, is franchises, existing franchise locations are bought and sold all day long throughout the world. Yes, a franchisor, their goal is to open up new locations, but their franchisees within the system buy and sell their locations all day long, every day. There's a bunch of them been sold during this show. So we're not talking about reinventing the wheel. That happens. So if an individual who's in a certain location doesn't want to relocate, doesn't want to open up a new location, my advice to them certainly is buy an existing one, because then you have a proven location within a proven system. Now, from a franchisor's perspective, if they're looking up to opening up new locations, one way to make money in franchising, it's hard to make money in franchise, damn near impossible to make any kind of significant money in franchising if you own one location. You got to own multiple locations. And so for individuals that may have operate 1 or 2 of these franchises, they're doing well, for their opportunity to expand, maybe geographically, they really need to give that strong consideration. There may be some inconveniences, but you want to build up your number of locations, because that's where you could really add value. And a franchisor would rather sell a location to a proven operator within their system than bring in somebody new altogether. So on both sides of the equation, you have this new label. That's more of a stigma. New for the buyer who said, oh, I don't want new, I want a resale. And the franchisor, yes, of course, they want to open up new locations, as many as possible, and make sure they're successful, because the more successful ones that they have, the more they can sell. But if there's someone within their system who's already operating a couple locations, and when they express being willing to relocate or what have you, franchisor is going to be thrilled.
Yeah, I get that. I understand that. Well, if there's people online now that are listening to this and they're thinking, right,
We hope there's a few of them, right?
we hope there are. Where is the best places to find about acquiring businesses? Is it brokers? Is it websites? Is it coming to a network like yours? Where's the best place for people to find out about acquiring businesses?
All of the above. And so what happens is, when you're looking to buy a business, you have to approach this at the beginning like a funnel, wide at the top, and then you want to squeeze out something very narrow at the bottom.
Right.
At the beginning, as long as you're not, if you're in a job and you have to retain confidentiality, you don't want anybody to know you're looking, because there's a certain amount of people are in that scenario, then obviously it becomes a little more challenging, but there are ways to do this. But assuming that you're okay with people knowing, the goal is you got to tell everyone at every opportunity and every interaction about the fact that you're looking to buy a business. You've got to get the word out, because you have no idea where it's going to come from.
Right.
And so at the beginning, it's very easy. The low-hanging fruit, if you will, is the business for sale websites online. They have
Mm.
hundreds of thousands of businesses for sale of every type in every geographical location possible. So it's a wonderful way to conduct your laboratory experiment, meaning you can look at different types of businesses and speak with lots of sellers within those industries because it's very important. You have to get to the point of knowing what business is right for you. And that's a completely separate or additional subject that we could talk about, because you have to know what business is right for you. But starting out, so you have the business for sale websites. Yes. You have business brokers and intermediaries. Yes. Or transfer agents, as they call them in the UK. You have investment bankers, banks, attorneys, accountants, other business owners. You should start to become curious about business. So when you go into the dry cleaner, or you go into the local restaurant, or you go into the local lawnmower repair location, whatever businesses and business owners you encounter, you have to start talking to them. What is it do you like? I talk to everybody. My wife goes completely bonkers. She's in the car. I'm dropping off my dry cleaning. I come out 40 minutes later. Okay. She said, what? And now she doesn't even ask. She knows what's happening. Okay. She'll just get on her phone. It's like, whenever he shows back up, that's cool. So this idea of speaking to business owners at every opportunity, because you never know where the lead comes from. I can't even tell you how many times businesses that I've acquired started out looking at one completely different, and then started doing my research or speaking to other business owners in the industries or ancillary businesses within that sector. And that led to thinking about something else. So the overarching theme here is get the word out to everyone at every opportunity in every situation. And you got to look at it like a shotgun or a funnel at the beginning, and then squeezing out something really narrow at the bottom, because you may have to do a direct solicitation ultimately to businesses, but you only want to do that when you know what type of business you want to buy.
If someone wanted start, let's just think of another example. Let's talk about like clothing, manufacturing of clothing. You said you've been involved in that business. If someone is thinking to themselves, I want to buy an apparel, I want to buy manufacturing to be able to, oh, not the manufacturer, build to be able to sell clothes, sports clothes, for example. And you say, go to the websites, go to brokers, to do courses, find out all the information from all the other businesses. If someone starts with sports clothing and they find a company that is, I don't know, suits, for example, and are you saying through that funnel process, you might start with the idea of sports clothing, but actually when you start drilling down and you're set, and we're going to talk about value in businesses in a little bit, but you're looking through those businesses and actually there's this great business that's actually to do with suits, and you're thinking, but I wanted sports clothing. Is there, what's the sort of mindset that you're trying to promote with all of the courses and things that you run and support you give people on that sort of idea of that pivot, that slight change in what your first expectation was versus what's actually a really great business, which would be really great, even though it's not necessarily exactly what you're looking at? How do you help people, coach people, teach people on that sort of, as you say, that funnel process?
The single most important thing with the entire process is to identify the type of business that's right for the individual, not the other way around. Not finding a business and then trying to fit a square peg into a round hole of, am I the right person for that business? Oh yeah, I think I could do this. I think I can do that. No, that's the wrong way.
Okay.
You don't want to back into this. You want to go in straight through the front door, meaning you have to get in tune with what is your greatest skill set and match that to a business. And the mantra that I've been teaching and preaching for decades, and it works, is whatever it is that you do best has to be the single most important driving factor of any of the revenue and profits of any business you consider purchasing, because for everything else you can hire. And if you have a good business, that the suit business, which looks like a good business, but you're the wrong person to operate it, unlike your business in the real estate, where if you overpay a little bit for a property, as long as you time heals every real estate error, you can get through a tough time. If you buy the business that's wrong for you, you're going bankrupt. It's
Right.
not going to be average. You're going to be out of business. And so when you look at that, as you go in and you start looking at the different businesses and using your example, apparel, there's sport clothing, there's formal wear, there's socks, there's a whole array of them. Now they're all within the sphere, if you will, of apparel. But some are manufacturers, some are distributors, some are importers, etc. As you get in tune with your skill set, it takes a little bit of work. Then you can look at the businesses and realize, hey, you know what? That particular suit business is a manufacturer. And I'm based on my skill set, that's what I should be doing. It's not the product. Where I would correct or expand upon what you said. The focus shouldn't be on the suit, because the product is irrelevant. Obviously, you got to be proud of it, okay, and enthusiastic about it, but it's the company, what the company does. You got to focus on the profit, not the product. The product you'll learn to really enjoy and love as long as the company is profitable. But if you fall in love with a product and it's a garbage company, you'll soon learn to hate the company and the product. And so it's the alignment is with what drives the business, not the product.
And you're absolutely right. As you say, some might be manufacturing, some might be distribution. That's what's the most important thing in choosing a business. That's a great answer. You said recently that today is the best time to acquire a business. What are the unique conditions that are happening in 2024 that make you feel that this is the best time to buy a business?
Over the last decades, I've seen that we've had ups and downs in the economy, but by and large, it's always the business sale universe has always been a seller's market, because there's always been a tremendous demand. A lot of that demand are lookers who will never get to the finish line, but there's always been a tremendous number of buyers looking at businesses. And so it's always been a seller's market, and good businesses coming onto the market. And we can define good businesses as second, good books and records. They could transition to a lot of people. Those businesses typically gone under contract in 30, 45 days. So because it's always been a seller's market, because of the fact there's always been a lot of buyers. However, recently, with rising interest rates, inflation, threats of recession, and the uncertainty over the last few years as a result of COVID. Some companies did great, some companies did awful, but the ones that have remained in business, that have come out of it, it's very hard to look at and say, what are the real numbers? Are the numbers the 2019 numbers? Are the numbers that spiked during COVID? Is it the 2023 numbers? So the history that you have in a business, you usually have this peaks and valleys or roller coaster effect. So it's hard to peg a valuation on a business, because one doesn't really know what the exact bottom line is, because it's been fluctuating dramatically over the last few years. So what that does, all those things, what that particular thing does is it lends itself for performance-based deals. Buyers looking and say, hey, Mr. or Mrs. Seller, I'm willing to pay this, but I need to know over the course of the next 12, 24 months after I buy it that the business is going to continue to do X volume of revenue and profits. So when you take a combination of inflation, recession threats, rising interest rates, and this roller coaster performances of the businesses, tons of buyers have gone out of the market. They're not buying. And so the buyer pool has shrunk down. When the buyer pool has shrunk down, you suddenly don't have a seller's market. So that's just math, right? The other part of it, why it's so wonderful for buyers, is being able to dictate terms, as opposed to valuations and multiples skyrocketed pre-COVID. And now they've come down. Sellers are starting to breathe oxygen from this planet, because they're realizing these multiples don't make economic sense. And so there's this squeeze all the way around, which is favorable for the buyer. And so you can walk into many of these companies right now where when the added layer to all of this is they call the silver tsunami, which is these hundreds, if not thousands of millions of business owners retiring over the next couple of years. So you've got this like ridiculous supply. So when you take a look, each one of these things independently could lend themselves to be a good time to buy a market. In the aggregate, it's unbelievable, because everything is pointing towards a buyer's market. And so you could really dictate the terms, which is what a seller wants. Like the price of the business is important, but the money is made on the terms.
So we're going to talk about negotiating, because that's something I definitely wanted to talk about. But let's go into how do you value a business? What's the best way, if someone's using the approach that you said, we'll do a funnel, we'll look at the different businesses. How is the best way to be able to value a business for someone who's looking to acquire?
We're going to look at it from a buyer and a seller side. The sellers value their business as following. They close their eyes and they throw dark. That's where they come up with their price, because when a seller's, what a seller thinks their business is worth rarely has anything to do with the value. They're all emotional. They're tied into this.
Yeah.
Either this is how much money I need to retire, or here's the blood, sweat, and tears, or in the UK, here's the blood, sweat, and beers that I put into this thing over the last number of years, and all these emotional components. Whereas a buyer has to look at it logically. It's got to fit into certain parameters of multiples of what we call owners that benefit or sellers discretionary earnings or adjusted EBITDA, which they're all fancy words for how much money is a new owner going to have to operate that business, service the debt, and pay themselves a salary based on the history of the business, and assuming all things remain status quo. So it's a formula, and we have articles on our website that explain that formula to people specifically to avoid getting into the minutia of it. But let's just establish that there's a number, there's a multiple, there's a bottom line number that gets a multiple attached to it.
And it's a multiple from the revenue that the company.
No, it's well, there's a couple of type of businesses, SaaS businesses, some alarm company business. Sometimes they multiply revenue, but 99% of all companies have to attach a multiple based on the profit, the adjusted earnings, because you can't pay your mortgage with revenue. You pay your mortgage with profits. 100%. And so a buyer, don't let anybody convince you should be factoring a business based on revenue, because you need to pay your bills. And so there's a multiple attached. And they say, now your next question obviously is going to be, I'll jump in and tell you what your next question is, what's the multiple? And that's what varies. And there's a wide range. So if we talk in the lower end of the market, multiples are all over the place. They go from 1 to 5. In the lower end, they could be 1 to 3, but that's a huge discrepancy. So a 1 times multiple may be a business where the owner is the business. They're the intellectual property. It could be a professional services firm, a doctor, dentist, attorney, accountant, where there's no telling if the customers are going to stay after that current owner leaves. Higher multiples, again, in the lower market, when you get into the 3s and 4s and 5s, some are tied to the bottom line number. Others are tied to the caliber of the business, meaning how well that business is going to transition. Can new owner take it over and to a reasonable degree expect for it to carry on and scale? So all the components are there good books and records? Are there no mitigating issues, no customer concentration, all these fundamentals? I developed a evaluation formula that we took and stress tested through 1,000 successful business acquisitions. And what we determined was that there are really 50 components that go into evaluation. Like you have the numbers, that's one piece and that's important, the bottom line number. But there's other parts to this. How well the business is going to transition. Again, is there customer concentration? What are the deal terms? What is the competition? What are any specific skill sets needed to operate the business? How easily can an employee leave and start their own business? The barriers of entry. So these 50 components, you answer these questions related to these 50 components, each one is getting a different weight. And that gets attached to the bottom line number and establishes a multiple. Because as well, you have to have a proper return on your investment. Because you have options. You can take your money on one end of the scale and put it into certificates of deposit and get a few % return, or you can take it all and go to Las Vegas and put it on 17 black and get 35 to 1. So in between is where a business has to fall. You've got to get, and a stock market will traditionally return 11%. And so you have to be above the stock market, below Las Vegas, but it's a good number because you're going to be working. And so I believe that you should be getting 25 to 33% return on your cash investment portion, because that makes sense relative to all the other investments. So when you take all those things into consideration, that's how a business is valued. It's not just picking rules of thumb. Rules of thumb are dumb. It doesn't matter what another similar business sold for. It makes because no two businesses are the same. And the other thing that I would tell anybody, and I tell anybody or everybody who's looking at acquiring a business, completely disregard the seller's asking price. Disregard it. Pay no attention to it. Forget it. Sometimes it's a barometer to find out how they're thinking about doing this, but you can't let that influence the decision. That has nothing to do with what you determine is the value of that business.
And something we discussed before we clicked record was the idea of putting low money down, not no money, but low money down, and then paying the previous owner of the business over a period of time, a 5-year period, and they get part of the. So just talk me through that, because I think that would be interesting for my audience, that whole strategy of low money down and paying it over 3 to 5 years.
I'm glad you said no money down, because that's really misleading. And you see some of that information online with people saying you buy these dream businesses for no money down. That's just illusion. So yes, seller financing, it's called balance of sale or seller financing, is a huge component of small business acquisitions. In the States, it's much more prevalent than the UK, for example, but it's catching on. And because that's what it takes to get a deal to the finish line. I've been teaching and preaching this for decades. 91% of our clients do their deals with seller financing. We show them exactly how at the lower end of the market. That's what it takes to get a business sold, because banks typically are not lending money to individuals to buy businesses. Some countries vary a little bit and some have programs, but on the whole, it does not happen because the buyer typically is an unproven entity. Yes, the business may be good, but the buyer has no track record, so they're not financing them. And so seller financing, the nice thing about seller financing, first of all, like we said, it's what it takes to get deals to the finish line. You have much more latitude with the seller. If the business runs into any difficulty, you can get a holiday from the seller. They understand. They don't want to take their business back. You're not putting up your house and your firstborn as collateral. The business itself serves as the security. And of critical importance to all of this is getting the seller to have skin in the game is the only way to validate everything that they've represented about the business. If they know they're providing financing, they're going to think twice. Now, the other thing that's really important is because of this silver tsunami that we talked about, all these businesses coming to market, seller financing will explode everywhere. It's been done in North America for years and years. It's getting some traction again in UK. With 3 clients this week that actually, those are terms that they negotiated in 3 completely different types of businesses. And so I would tell a buyer that this is something you have to push for. And the more challenges that the seller has of selling that business, the more leverage you have for seller financing. Now, you're not buying these for 1% down and 99% seller financing. Exactly to your question, you're a logical guy. The percentages vary. They go from 10 to 50% down. The business changes, but you can negotiate a huge component of seller financing, and you got to push for it. I've never, ever bought a business without seller financing, ever.
Really? Okay. Okay. Because as you say, in the UK, it's something that I feel like friends of mine that have bought businesses have structured their acquisition through seller financing
Yes.
and doing that. But I would imagine maybe 10, 15 years ago, it wasn't really a thing that was being done in the UK as much. I would support that idea because, as I say, a friend of mine just bought a company. I won't say what industry it's in, but and she said to them, look, we'll give you, I think it was like 15% upfront.
Yeah,
And
makes
then
sense.
she staggered the payments over 3 years. I would have thought it'd been 5, but I think it was 3 years. So
Yeah, we see it a little longer, typically around 5 years. And that's why it's very important when buyers go in and speak to sellers. This idea, and you mentioned earlier, we'll talk about negotiation, and this is probably part of it because it's something to think about that dovetails on this pretty well, which is when you go in and meet with a seller, and you've got to meet sellers. You can't buy a business from an ad online. You've got to go in and meet face-to-face with sellers, and preferably not even Zoom calls. Go sit in their presence. But you want to establish a meaningful relationship and a thoughtful conversation with them,
yeah.
because you never know where that conversation goes. And if you impress them as you're the right person to take over their business, because there is a percentage of sellers, yes, the price and terms are important to them, but it's for percentages, it's critically important that their legacy is carried on by the right person, that their employees are taken care of. And
Yeah,
so if you,
exactly. The whole point is, from a seller's point of view, they want their business to have legacy, to have to extend through another generation with you taking over the business. So it's in their benefit that their baby that they've grown from perhaps nothing and they want to now sell because they want to retire or do something different. It is in their interest to get the right buyer as well. So there is we're going to talk about negotiating now, but that whole idea that the seller wants to have someone successful in that business. So it's critical for both sides to have that as a successful purchase and a successful legacy for that business.
oh, absolutely. And that's why you want to have a real good relationship and establish a good relationship with the seller. And so during the conversations, and it's certainly at the beginning, you don't come through like a bull in a china shop with as far as negotiating is concerned. You want to establish a nice relationship because yes, there certainly are sellers that they don't care about the legacy. They don't care about the employees. They just want to sell this thing and get the hell out of Dodge, right? But there's a large percentage of people that care about their legacy and care about their
Yeah.
employees, and they want to see their business transition to the right person. So if you can impress the seller that you're the right person for that business to perpetuate their legacy, then they are going to go bend over backwards
Yeah.
as far as deal terms are concerned, because they want the right person in the business. So I can't overemphasize how important it is to establish that relationship with the seller in these conversations and especially at the beginning, to not only impress them that you're the right person to acquire the business, but you're a good person, that you're empathetic, you understand their hot points, you understand that they're going through some stress as well, because seller's remorse is as frequent as buyer's remorse, because a part of them is getting let go. It's like losing a little bit of a limb, right?
Yeah.
And these conversations, having good, meaningful conversations with the seller at the beginning is really important. So you establish like a rock solid framework to have a good conversation going forward with the idea of getting to a deal.
Yeah. So about the negotiating, so from a buyer's point of view, what's maybe the pitfalls, maybe the mistakes that people go into when they're trying to buy a business? How do you approach the negotiation? And I know we talked about that just now about just getting a good relationship with them, but when there's negotiations about the numbers and you're really structuring the deal, how do you advise people, help people, support people on that negotiation phase with the seller?
On the numbers point, for example, that's the easiest one because numbers are numbers. Numbers don't lie. People lie, but numbers don't lie. What is, as a drop down to that, is you have the seller who has this idea of what their business is worth. We've established that as rarely has anything to do with the value. The buyer needs to be able to assemble a defensible valuation. That's why it's critically important that they don't rely on hearsay or ridiculous rules of thumb or things that don't make sense. It's be able to use a quantifiable methodology to establish a valuation that they could defend to the seller. Because if not, then each side is talking from two different sides of their mouth. They'll never come to an agreement. So if a buyer has a defensible valuation, then you can have that conversation. Now, there are some times that are challenges to question part one related to some of the difficulties or how you should approach these negotiations, whether it be relative to the numbers or other deal terms. Of course, we've established you want to be empathetic, you want to be transparent, you want to understand their perspective. But a buyer also has to go into this transaction being able to understand and convey the following. This is not a win. This is a win for the buyer, and a seller is reasonably happy. And the reason for that is because regardless of the deal terms, even to cite your friend, the lady who purchased that business with 85% seller financing, irrespective of those deal terms, the buyer is still assuming the largest part of the risk in these transactions, because that even in that case, she's on the hook for 85% of a note. So the buyer assumes the largest part of the risk. The buyer has to win, the seller has to be reasonably happy. The other thing that what people should understand going into this, you don't have to win every point. It's not, don't turn everything
Don't
into
go
a
into
battle.
it for a fight. Yeah, it's not
Don't
a
go into a
fight.
battle. You don't have to win every point. Sometimes you can't come to an agreement on certain points. So you got to take a step back and you come back to it. This other philosophy negotiators say, if you give in to one point, you should get something else. Give on something, get something else. I think that's nonsense. Sometimes you just give in. Other times you just get. And so looking at this philosophically, and going into this, trying to understand the seller's hot buttons. There's two real bottom lines on all of this. Number one, if you can find out what the seller's hot buttons are and sue them, you're going to get a deal. That's number one. Number two, when the buyer and seller trust each other and they like each other, and the buyer sincerely wants to buy and the seller sincerely wants to sell, you can't stop them from getting a deal done. They are going to find a way on every single point. But don't go in this like a murderer. Go in this in a conversation. People get completely whacked out, think they have to win every point. And those people don't end up buying businesses, or they piss off the seller so much, or they start drawing lines in the sand. Oh, that's a deal breaker. It's a deal breaker. And then 2 minutes later, they're moving back on that. So you start losing all credibility. Those are things you just don't want to do.
Yeah. So the show is about growing and scaling businesses. So with your experience, how do companies in the growth phase approach mergers and acquisitions to fuel that growth?
You could grow organically, but M&A is a wonderful way of acquiring businesses. And for individuals that are listening, for example, we keep using this term M&A. Let's reduce it to what it is: buying and selling businesses. So
Yeah.
we'll call it that. But a beautiful way to grow your business is through acquisitions. Organic growth is wonderful because you put a plan into place, the plan works, the business grows, you feel pretty damn good about it. But growing through acquisition, whether that be a strategic acquisition, a competitor as an example, or an ancillary business where you can buy a company that you bolt on and that has additional products or services that you can sell to the existing client base. That makes a lot of sense. But you have to approach it and look at it and say, this is realistic. Very often small business owners think that mergers and acquisition are only for billion-dollar companies, and nothing could be further from the truth. This is something that could be done all day long on Main Street. And so you have to do it in a good way, meaning if you're in, I don't know, you're in the commercial cleaning business, you clean office buildings, you have a staff of 12 people and you're doing a number of offices and you want to buy another commercial cleaning company, or you want to buy an ancillary business that services those type of clients. But let's use the example of another commercial cleaning company, and you know who your competitors are. For God's sakes, and if you don't know who competitors are, you probably shouldn't be in business. But I'm gonna make the grand assumption you know who your competitors are, because you really should. You can approach them, and you have to do that in a good way, meaning the competitor is probably uncomfortable that you're going to steal their clients. And so you come up with mutual NDAs, and there's clauses in there where you could protect, you can't steal customers or what have you for a certain period of time or any engagement. And then once you have that similar to the individual, you establish a nice relationship, you should explore acquiring their business. And what's nice about that, when you grow through acquisition, so you have your company using the same example, commercial cleaning, and you buy another commercial cleaner. The beauty of that, and I built my whole business, 13 companies plus one co-investment this way. I never took money out of the next company. Because I had the one base that was paying me what I needed to live on. I used the profits and the cash flow from every subsequent business to grow it or to pay down the debt as fast as I possibly can. Right. And so when you think about doing that, you can bolt on and build a big business pretty fast with that strategy.
Yeah. I think you've convinced me.
Okay, let's go. You need any help? I'm ready. Rock and roll, baby. Whatever you need.
So something that was on the information that was provided to me about you was this idea of you working with Ray Dalio's family office. So how did that start? And I understand you've been helping his son with buying businesses. How did Ray Dalio call you up, or were you approached by the family office? How did that relationship start?
Relationship started many years ago. Actually, in 2007, I got a call from a gentleman by the name of Ray Dalio. I had no idea who he was. And he told me at the time that his son was living in Florida, and they were looking to hire someone to mentor him, to teach him how to buy businesses. And would I be interested? And he got my name referred to him, and thought that was very nice. And at that particular point, my youngest son, I have 4 kids. My youngest son was just diagnosed with epilepsy. And I was thinking about taking off a few months to learn about the disease, because I had no knowledge about it. And I expressed this to Ray, and I said, I'm taking off a few months, and so I really can't do it. And he was very kind. And again, I had no idea who the guy was. To me, it was Ray Dalio, could have been Shmei Palio. I had no idea who this guy was. And he said, look, I have a lot of good connections in the healthcare field. If I can help you with anything, I'm happy to put you in touch with doctors, neurologists, psychologists, etc. Just let me know. It was like irrespective of whether or not you take on the consulting work. And I was really blown away by that, because it was just such an incredibly kind gesture. And I said, okay, I'll meet with your son regardless. And I met with his son, Devin, and I thought the guy was unbelievable. He was 29 at the time. I really liked him. He was smart. He was curious. He was really sincere, and really enjoyed him. And I said to him, I'll take on the consulting work. And the goal was, and at that point he was studying my course, and we met once a week for a couple of hours. And then we started looking at businesses, and about 6 months went by. And then their family offices was just opening up at the point. They had 3 people, and it made sense for the family, for Devin to go back to go work for the family office, because they were just starting to build. Now, keep in mind, Devin and I worked together for 6-7 months. I had no idea who Ray Dalio was. There was only one point at about months in, he mentioned something to me about, offhanded, because he was the most down-to-earth, humble guy you could possibly imagine. And he mentioned something, and I said, it triggered, I think this family has a lot of money. And somehow I looked it up online and said, it was like, holy smokes. The guy was worth like $10 billion.
Hedge fund. Yeah, biggest
yeah, and
hedge
the guy
fund.
was worth like $10 billion at the time. Subsequently, Devin went back. We always stayed in touch, and we had a nice relationship, and he worked at the family office, and he grew and evolved to become the co-CEO of the family office. It grew from 3 to 25, from up to 100 and plus people. And then he decided to leave and get into something entrepreneurial. And Ray and Devin approached me again, because he had never bought any businesses. And they approached me with this idea of coming in and forming an investment company with me as a partner and Devin as a partner. And I was going to mentor Devin again at a higher level of buying businesses on a full-time basis. And we came to an agreement. The agreement took 3 seconds. It really was. It was a 30, I should say 3 seconds, it was 30 seconds. Okay. And I'm not exaggerating. To come to an agreement. And I went to work full time as a partner. We had a company called P Squared. It was Devin and I. And Devin and I were close like brothers. Ray was our only investor. He was terrific as far as investment committee. We made a number of investments and we were running our business. And then unfortunately on December 17th, 2020, Devin was killed in a car accident.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah,
Okay.
at 42 years old. And of course, you can imagine the devastation for their family.
Of course.
And Devin and I, as I mentioned, we besides business partners, we shared an office. We had a number of offices, but we worked right across from each other. It's as close as two people could possibly be, like brothers. And then we decided that the business was stood up for Devin, so we wound down. We didn't need the business anymore. We kept our investments. And of course, the family and I view them as extended family. They're incredible people. And so that's how I met. Unfortunately, it was a very sad ending
Yes.
to that, but we met in a really interesting way. We had an unbelievable relationship. It was the mentoring part evolved to really a brotherhood, and that was really nice because I never really viewed Devin as a mentee. He was always a partner to me because we were partners with Ray, and Devin was an unbelievable human being, the smartest, nicest guy I ever met. There's people I've met as smart, people I've met as nice, but a combination of two. I never met anybody smarter and nicer. And I have a beautiful relationship with the family, and I consider them, and we consider each other extended family to one another. And it was a great learning experience for me, having the exposure to the family office, even though we operated independently. There was unbelievable learning through my 3.5, 4 years that we were together. Just phenomenal exposure to resources, to people, and again just the core learning, because Ray gave us a lot of latitude to really figure out what it is that we want to do when we grow up. As far as an investment thesis, he was terrific as an investor. I couldn't have scripted a better investor. So that whole period of time was a phenomenal period of time in my life. But unfortunately, it had just a horrific ending.
Oh, I'm so sorry to hear that. My brother
Thank you.
passed away at 42 as well,
Oh,
and it was
geez.
a massive. People die, like people dying young is so difficult to comprehend. You just can't process it that someone's been taken for you at the age of 42.
Thank you. And I agree with you. It
Understand.
makes no sense. You can't make any sense of it. And I know the void Devin's passing left in my heart is a fraction of what his parents and his siblings, and he has at the time a 3-year-old daughter and a wife. So it's my sorrow is a fraction of theirs. It's unimaginable. And if you have any children, it's just horrible. It's unimaginable and inexplicable, right? So
Yeah, absolutely.
Crazy. Thank you for your kind comments.
Thank you for sharing that with me. I had no idea about the tragedy, so thank you for your honesty. What's your current investment strategy? So you've obviously bought businesses, we've talked about that, but do you invest in real estate? Do you invest in stocks and shares, or are you purely just buying businesses?
I'm a shitty stock investor. I actually would probably be the greatest financial planner in the world, because my advice to clients would be, look, what I buy, you sell. What I sell, you buy. Okay. Yeah. So I haven't acquired a business in a few years. My goal, I'm 62 and I got tons of energy.
You look great for
And
62.
God bless you. Thank you very much. I want to devote the next stage of my life, working life, to really helping as many people as possible. We've had an unbelievable run with our program. I've done intermediary work. I bought a bunch of businesses. I've worked on the sell side. I still take on a couple of engagement of people that I really trust and I want to work with them, but a very limited basis. But on the buy side, we've sold 100,000 programs, and I want to sell a lot more than that, because I really want to help people. And I do this not for the money. If I never sell another program, as long as it makes no difference whatsoever to my financial situation. I went into this business to help people, and that's all I want to do. And that's why I make it ridiculously affordable. And I also get on the phone with buyers all day long to help them. And of course, I never charge them. I just want to see people accomplish what I've been so blessed to do, from a really lower income background with no college education and very little money to start. So it's a nice story. And so I'm not making any investments into companies, because I really want to devote this last tranche of my life to helping as many people as possible.
Amazing. What a great way to end that chapter of this conversation. Look, we're coming to the end of the interview. I ask the same 6 questions to all my guests. They're quick fire questions. They don't need a quick fire answer. First question is, what's the best decision that you've made?
Marrying my wife.
Good answer. She's probably listening.
I don't know if she is. Well, it would be nice if she had the same answer too, but yes. Yeah.
What's yeah, go on, finish.
No, that's without question. That's the best decision I ever made.
What's the best piece of advice you've been given?
Don't piss in the wind.
Because you get wet as well.
You get wet. If you just, sometimes the decision has to be to quit. Sometimes don't just bang your head against the wall so much in certain situations or with people or in relationships or in businesses that aren't working out for whatever reason. Don't keep banging your head against the wall just because it's going to feel good when you stop. So don't piss in the wind, because sometimes you just have to make a decision to pivot and go another way.
Yeah. Who's helped you most in your career?
Lots of people. Lots of people. I couldn't narrow it down.
Couple of
A
shout
couple of
outs.
shout outs. Certainly my father, because just from good sage advice and wisdom. Definitely the learnings that I had during my time with the Dalio family office. And I would say in whole, though, my first real job, serious job, I worked for my uncle for a couple of years after school, and I didn't have to go to university, but I worked at a company, a toy and consumer product company in Canada, and the individuals that were running those companies, I probably learned more and got the best advice from them when I reflect upon what has benefited, what has paid me the most dividends over the years.
Thank you. Tell me about a regret that you have.
Tell me about a regret. I don't really. I would say this is tied into a question someone asked me recently. I would have liked to get over my ego and insecurity earlier in my life.
Did it slow down your progress?
It slowed down my progress in a lot of ways, because there's always a drop down to ego and insecurity, this idea of, and I've really evolved from that, which has been quite easy because when it just light went on. So things, when you have too big an ego, you tend to want to be right versus doing right.
Mm.
You tend to want to be the smartest person in the room. And I want to be the dumbest person in the room. I've embraced being wrong. So I've really evolved, but it was a hindrance. You tend to, when you have an ego, you tend to hire people that are going to just do what you say to do versus hiring people that are bigger, better, faster, and going to challenge you. So as a young business owner, my ego and insecurity certainly got in the way for too long a period of time. I recognized it and made a 180-degree turn, because that was real easy, and it's been incredibly rewarding as a result, business, personal relationships, etc., for many years. But if the one regret was, I should have been in contact with that much earlier, that
So
as
what
being a real negative.
you described it as a light bulb moment. What was that moment? Was there something in specifically, or was there something you worked on to drop the ego?
Yeah, I've been married a second time. My current wife and I are married for 23, going to be 23 years. When I got divorced, and I was in 19, I was 36 years old, my ex-wife was having some challenges, and I'm a problem solver by nature. And so I went directly to, here's how we're going to solve it. Boom, boom. Versus saying, I should have just shut up, sit back, give her a big hug, listen to everything, try to find a way to work through it at her pace. And realize that, the reason why I didn't do that is just because having an ego and having to say, here's the right way to do it, and let's go down this path. And it just proved to be disastrous. Now, don't get me wrong. I don't regret getting divorced. I have an unbelievable wife and marriage, and that's great. And sounds perverse, but glad that happened. But that was an aha moment, because I recognized that's not a good way to operate. And one of the things, when you go back, and one of the things that I learned, read in Ray Dalio's book, for example, Principles, when he talks about pain plus reflection equals progress. So if you can, these things that happen in your life, if you could sit back and take a real good objective view of things and why this happened, and reflect upon it in a good way, you could make some enormous progress. So that was really the aha moment.
Thank you. Thank you for your honesty. What are you most proud of?
My family.
So you have 4 kids, did you say?
4 kids, terrific kids. Terrific kids. One grandson who's going to be, he's terrific already, but he's going to be even more terrific. Like, my kids are the principal. He's the interest, right? I mean, the interest, if someone once told me the interest is always sweeter than the principal. So yes, that's what I'm certainly most proud of. They're good people. I'm not, three of them are professionals. One of them is working his way towards a career. So I'm proud of their accomplishments, but they're they're good, solid citizens, caring people.
Amazing.
So that's what I'm most proud of.
Why do you do what you do?
Because I love it.
But
I
why
just,
do you love it? Like,
oh,
why?
okay. So there's, okay. So I know these are six rapid fire questions. This one I
No,
don't
go
have
for
to
it.
give
We've got time. It's fine.
I don't have to give this a lot of thought. There's a lot of components to what I do that I find phenomenally interesting. Number one, at the top of the pyramid is I help a lot of people. And I've made some terrific money and had some great rewards from businesses that I've owned. But nothing compares professionally to the gratification I get being able to help someone do what I've been able to do, or someone sends me a note or picks up the phone and says, Richard, Mr. Parker, you've changed my life. And here's how it happened. And I have binders full of those binders.
Nice.
And so the gratification from that is more enjoyable than anything else I've ever done professionally. There's not even a close second. So that's one part of it, which is a massive part. The second part related to the world of buying and selling businesses, I find it fascinating to get up on a Tuesday morning, and by Wednesday, I'm learning about a completely new business I didn't even exist.
Right.
And that I really have to dig myself in when I was buying businesses. I have to learn how to that business intimately. And that has really transcended to the work that I've done represented sellers. And I still do a little bit of that because I force myself to learn that business in a short period of time. I want to be the second most knowledgeable person about that business besides the owner in the world. And so I really have to dig in. And I love learning. And I love that questions beget more questions. And I love that journey. And so that's a really big part of it. The third part is, we all answer to someone, but I love being my own boss. I love the fact that I don't have a ceiling on what I can earn. And that when I first got into it, that many years ago, that was the big reason why. And I love the fact that I don't have shackles. There's someone, no one's bigger than the game, and you're always answer to someone. But I love the fact that if I succeed, great. If I fail, great. It's up to me. And the fourth part is I love the people that I get to interact with in the world of entrepreneurship, whether they be future business owners, employees that I can empower, help change their lives, build a business together. I just find it's a real good, I'll say brotherhood. Someone will probably get pissed off politically incorrect and tell me it should be like a human hood or whatever. But yes, there's like a brotherhood or a fraternity of individuals within this whole universe of buying and selling businesses that I just find really interesting. And you get to meet some really smart ass people. So you could learn a whole lot. And so I find that really exciting.
Amazing. Thank you. What does legacy mean to you?
I think of legacy more from the standpoint of a human legacy. I don't pay much attention to the business legacy. That stuff takes care of itself. And in the grand scheme of things, I'm not trying to be overly philosophical, but in the grand scheme of things, who really cares? It doesn't really matter to the world as far as I'm concerned. So to me, a legacy is, I always used to say that on my tombstone, I want to put on, I'd rather be fishing. But I think I just want to be thought about and remembered as a good guy.
And lastly, where can people find you if they want to find out about you or your business?
The best place is go to richardparker.com. We have that's a resource website with articles and free reports, and our courses are offered there through our sister site. But anybody wanting to learn about buying businesses can immerse themselves in a ridiculous amount of content, helpful content, real world, practical content. And again, it's richardparker.com. And similarly, if someone wants to get in touch with me, just use the contact page on that, and you can get in touch with me. Just let them know that the contact is for me, and staff will make sure that it comes to me. And I guarantee you I will respond.
Thank you, Richard. Thank you so much for your time. It's been an absolute pleasure. I have really enjoyed this conversation. You're an excellent guest. And yeah, just your mission now to help as many people as you can. I applaud you, and just thank you so much for giving me a different insight into buying businesses, and that whole idea of acquisition by growth, I think is absolutely fascinating. So thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me. I really enjoyed our conversation. It was terrific. Thanks again.
Thanks a lot. I really hope you've enjoyed that content. It's a really fascinating interview that I've done there. So please do, if you are enjoying this content, please do give a subscribe. It'd be really good to boost the subscriptions. It really makes a difference to the algorithm in YouTube. So thank you for that. If you do hit subscribe, hit the bell icon, and you'll get all of the content. You'll get notified when all the content is available. Thank you so much for your time. It's really appreciated. Thanks a lot.